Hi everyone. With COVID third wave lockdowns spreading and expanding across Canada almost daily, I think it's important to try and help those in the pro-lockdown camp understand why so many voices, including myself, are advocating for targeted measures to assist those individuals most vulnerable to COVID rather than these continued one-size-fits-all government lockdowns. Following the lead of others, so-called conservative premiers, Alberta's Jason Kenney recently decided to scrap his government's established benchmarks for reopening the economy and restoring Albertans' lost civil liberties, and has instead plunged Albertans into a third lockdown. Of course, he, the bureaucracy, and most of the government-funded media cheering it on will not miss a single paycheck over the decision. With great piety, Mr. Kenney declared that he had to do this to save lives, and that those who disagreed with his decision, well, they were being reckless with life. They just didn't love life as much as he does. Those who want to reopen their businesses right now are being selfish, he said. Let's get a few things straight here, Mr. Kenney. These lockdowns have unleashed a mental health epidemic of historic proportions, are costing hundreds of lives, and the livelihoods of tens of thousands of families that rely on the private sector to earn their bread. Right now, about 3 to 5 Albertans per day, overwhelmingly in their final months of expected life, are dying with COVID-19. And that's tragic, it's sad. Many of those individuals, of course, have comorbidities that were the much larger cause of their deaths. As you can see in this graph, though case counts have increased again, deaths essentially have not, as older and more vulnerable Albertans have been vaccinated, and the young and healthy are generally not susceptible to serious outcomes from the virus. In comparison to the 3 to 5 people dying each day with COVID, every single day, 75 other Albertans die from other causes. More and more of these are young deaths from suicide, domestic violence, and drug overdoses. Largely ignored by the government will be the deaths and illness due to missed medical treatments, increased obesity, and skyrocketing alcoholism and drug use. In the last year, we've sadly lost 2,000 Albertans to COVID, or that had COVID, when they died. Most of those who died were an average age of 81 years with serious comorbidities. Alberta's average life expectancy is 81.5. Roughly 26,000 Albertans died of other causes during that same period. 2,000 versus 26,000. In fact, up to July 1st, 2020, there was no statistically significant increase in overall deaths from all causes in Alberta over the previous year in 2019. Although I do expect there will be a small increase in the overall death rate in 2020 once those numbers are finally made available. But those 26,000 other Albertans lost to other causes are not eulogized each day by Dr. Hinshaw. They are dying from things like lung disease, car accidents, suicide, drug overdoses, heart disease, and cancer, to name some of the major reasons. And yet we don't ban alcohol, we don't ban smoking. We allow driving, and McDonald's and Timmy's still appear to be free to sell as many Big Macs and donuts as they wish to. Until this year, we placed enough value on freedom and personal responsibility to mostly respect a person's right to live their life in the way that they felt was best for them. If they wish to smoke, they can smoke. They'll have to pay some taxes for the cost of that decision on the health system. But if they want to drive, they can drive. If they want a beer, they can have a beer. We permit diving and skydiving and motorbikes, statistically more risky behaviors. We allow people to date and have intimate relations with whomever they consensually choose to, despite the risks associated with STDs. We encourage all of these groups to be safe, to make responsible, good decisions to protect their own health. But we know these risks, and we permit them to take these risks regardless. Allowing individuals to judge their own risk tolerance for themselves doesn't seem to apply to COVID. Instead of encouraging and financially assisting those who are genuinely at risk of having a serious reaction to this virus to isolate if they so choose, our leaders have abandoned civil liberties for all in the name of protecting us all, even those that don't need protection and in fact are often harmed by that so-called protection. The result of government's overreaching paternalism is that those who are genuinely vulnerable, like seniors, are often left without the protections and supports that they need for lack of resources. The government spreads resources and attention too broadly over too many groups and not at risk, and our seniors, in this case, paid the price. Now, I've had COVID-19. My kids have had it. Several of my extended family members have had it. Many of my friends have had it. It is a serious and very contagious flu, like several others that have come before it. Not one of my family members or friends has come close to dying from it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not serious. It is. It doesn't mean it can't be lethal. It can be. But it wasn't serious for us because we were not in an at-risk group. But even if we were, is it not our business and decision as to whether or not we want to take a risk and go to a restaurant with others who are also comfortable taking that same risk? It's up to us to decide if we wish to take the risk of going out to buy our groceries or get gas or to put our kids in minor hockey and cheer them on, or to do anything that free men and women should be allowed to do. If this was a 2 to 4 week pause on these activities to buy time to understand what we were really up against before it spread too widely, I could maybe understand that. But it's been over a year now. Children and young people are literally losing some of the best days and experiences of their lives to a virus that poses infinitely less risk to them than driving to school or hockey. Our young people's and small business owners' freedoms apparently are less important than those of us trying to avoid a 0.1% chance of having a serious COVID outcome. And an outcome that we could prevent if we wanted to by simply locking ourselves indoors and letting them, the children and young people, be free. So who is being selfish here? Look, for those of you still afraid of COVID, I don't blame you. Not one bit. For one, you may be in a vulnerable group or live with a vulnerable person. In that case, I totally agree that we should be providing you and your loved ones with all the resources you need to isolate. If you are not in that situation and are still afraid just for yourself, you have been bombarded with a government-funded media fear campaign for over a year now. It's been relentless. You have trusted your leaders and their bureaucrats. You have trusted so-called experts, or at least the ones that the government's media deem worthy to listen to. But it's time to now look at the facts. You've been deceived and misled for far too long. There is no shame in acknowledging the seriousness of this virus and then taking logical precautions that do not infringe on the freedoms of other people. We have lost something fundamental to our free society over the past year. The right to live our lives in peace, free from undue government interference, to take our kids to their sports, to visit with and have friends and family in our own homes, to open, operate, or work for businesses deemed non-essential by governments, to go to the gym and stay healthy, to assemble for weddings and funerals, for graduations and worship services in a manner that we choose, not the government. Those rights are not just nice to have. They are fundamental freedoms that we have been stripped of. Some of our children will never know some of these freedoms. They have already lost a best year of their life. Society took that from them without their permission for a virus that posed no threat to them. We chose collectivism over individualism, and as history has repeatedly taught us, we did far more damage than good in doing so. Believing and upholding our civil rights and liberties is not selfish, as Jason Kenney, Justin Trudeau, premiers across Canada, and Dr. Hinshaw would have you believe. Supporting businesses that refuse to be locked down and raising your voice in peaceful but assertive dissent are the acts of freedom-loving patriots who understand that a life of freedom is the only kind of life worth living. And as those who stormed the beaches of Normandy well understood, the only kind of life worth fighting and dying for. That's my take, as always, unfiltered. Stay strong and be free, everyone.